Kia ora, this is Liz. Welcome to Dames the Blaze. If you're new to the channel, please go watch the intro video so you know what's going on. Otherwise, grab your Bible and we will dig on in. And while you're getting your Bible, I will just remind you that if you have not subscribed yet, please do so. And if at the end of the video you have enjoyed it, please give it a like. Today we are looking at John chapter 9 verses 39 to 41, which brings us to the end of chapter 9. So I'll read them for you now. And Jesus said, "For judgment I have come into this world, that those who do not see may see, and that those who see may be made blind." Then some of the Pharisees who were with him heard these words and said to him, "Are we blind also?" Jesus said to them, "If you were blind, you would have no sin. But now you say we see, therefore your sin remains." Now don't forget where we are, right? We have had the man born blind. He has been healed. He has had his little interrogation. He has been chucked out of the temple. Jesus went to find him. And this is where we are, right? With the man at his feet in worship, Jesus turns to address those who are milling around. Some of them are on his side. That would be the disciples. Some are not. And that would be the bunch of Pharisees that are continually following him around, trying to find something they can accuse him of. There's also possibly a contingent that followed the previously blind man to see where he went and what he did and try and find him guilty of something. There are those out there, and the internet and social media has made this worse, who just want to find fault with everyone else. Ancient times, modern times, people are the same wherever and whenever you go. So Jesus looks up and out to the crowd and says, "For judgment I have come into this world, that those who do not see may see, and that those who see may be made blind." Curious little statement, no? For judgment I have come into this world. For judgment. Wait a second. I thought he said he didn't come to judge. Well, he does say that. John even records it in his 12th chapter. He says, "As for anyone who hears my words and does not keep them, I do not judge him, for I have not come to judge the world, but to save the world." Okay, so are we looking at a real contradiction here? John's Gospel does actually talk of Jesus judging quite a bit, actually. We've covered it a number of times. It's not something that the other three focused on or talked about much, but John does. Why is that, do you suppose? John's Gospel was aimed at proving Jesus was God. Judgment is an attribute of godliness. Is he not called the judge of all the earth? That is what Abraham calls him when talking to God about the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. A solid judgment if ever I saw one. As part of the Godhead, Jesus does get to judge, right? And yet the form of judgment that came that first time isn't what we think of when we think of that word, and it isn't what he meant. That's what he meant. The kind of judgment that we think of is what he meant in John 12. But the Greek word here used in John 9 is krima, which means the verdict itself. And this is the only time John uses it. The other times he uses krino, which means the act of judgment or decision making. Biblical judgment is not usually actually about condemnation. Often it's about separation. Jesus doesn't need to bring judgment in one sense. Our actions and words judge us without his help. His presence, though, does expose those actions. They bring a verdict, which is what I think he's getting at here. If we carry on in chapter 12 of John, we might get a clearer picture of what I mean. So we have already, "As for anyone who hears my words and does not keep them, I do not judge him, for I have not come to judge the world, but to save the world." So the next verse says, "There is a judge for the one who rejects me and does not receive my words. The word that I have spoken will judge him on the last day." So there's this cause and effect going on. Many in God's judgments, many of them are merely a consequence of the actions of man. But is that what's happening here? Jesus said, "For judgment I come into this world, that those who do not see may see, and those who see may be made blind." He does, in some sense, pass the verdict, but that verdict is based on how people receive him and his words. It's not that he's going, "You're judged and you're judged." It's that who he is, how he was, that judged them themselves. They didn't need him to say, "Hey, you're a sinner." It's a cause and effect thing. It's not him actively doing judging. Isaiah spoke similar words in the year that King Uzziah died. He was told to go out and prophesy, saying, "Keep on listening, but do not perceive. Keep on looking, but do not understand. Render the hearts of this people insensitive, their ears dull, their eyes dim. Otherwise they might see with their eyes, hear with their ears, understand with their hearts, and return and be healed." Which isn't to say that God is forcing people into a blind corner where they don't understand and can't be saved. But it is to say that the more Isaiah speaks, the more calloused the people will become. It's not a prediction so much as a description, given by the one who knows the heart of man so very well. You also see this kind of idea played out in the Exodus passages with the attitude of Pharaoh. The word records that God hardened Pharaoh's heart, but that was after Pharaoh had already hardened his own heart 7 times. Each subsequent plague only made Pharaoh more determined to prove himself to be the greater God. And so we could say, and Moses does, that God stepped in to prevent him changing his mind after the 8th plague, when really what's happening is that Pharaoh's heart has been made hard and God's actions only made it worse. Here, Jesus is addressing a mixed multitude. Some of them were on the fence. The healing of this previously blind man maybe has drawn them further into his camp, but some are still openly hostile and refuse to see, and on them the verdict of unrepentant sinner will soon fall, not because Jesus will call them unrepentant, but because their continued pushback against his identity puts them in that camp. These are the ones who will end up blinded by what Jesus does and says, who get worse the longer the ministry goes on. But it's not Jesus that causes the blindness. It's that the continued deliberate blinding of oneself causes blindness. Do you see the cause and effect? His acts of compassion showed up their acts of robbery and deceit. Every time he touched a leper, he showed them to be uncaring, callous over the hurts of the world. Every time he reached out to a beggar or a woman, he showed them up to be prideful and lofty. His actions were shining bright, and it showed the dark shadows that they lived in. And so those amongst them that were truly already gone got worse when he turned up. They hardened their hearts. They refused to see. They became blind. While this word blind includes physical blindness, it's clear from the Pharisees' statement that they also accept the metaphoric interpretation of it. Blindness isn't just about physically seeing, it's also about lacking understanding or insight, not seeing in a mental sense. We still use the phrase, "I see," when we understand something, or "I don't see" when we don't understand something. So it should come as no shock to us, and I suspect it doesn't, that Jesus isn't referring to someone going actually blind, but rather that the eyes or understanding of the mind will get darker. The more one refuses to see, the darker life becomes, until one is mentally blind to the things of God. And the opposite is also true. The more one leans into the things of God, the more one comes into the light, the more light one sees. Our eyes adjust, our mind adjusts. You can see this contrast in the hours of the crucifixion. As he hung on the cross between 2 unspecified criminals, one turned to him, was appalled, cursed him, and remained in his darkness. The other looked, saw the light, and was drawn to it. One was a sheep, one was a goat. One was wheat, one was tares. It shouldn't surprise us that Jesus came to judge, because this separation type of judgment is all over the place. Jesus' mission was to save the lost. That was primary to his time on earth. But during the course of that mission, others would be truly lost. Others would decide that they didn't want what he was offering, and in the course of making that decision, God would abide by it, and they would cause their own destruction. So this statement, as you can imagine, it does not go down well with some in the audience. In particular, The Pharisees take issue with Jesus' words. Surprise, surprise. So they ask, are we blind also? Which is an excellent question, isn't it? We should all ask ourselves this question from time to time, just to make sure we haven't fallen into some ditch of understanding that keeps us from seeing the truth. Unfortunately, that's not the manner with which the Pharisees asked the question. Jesus has already called the Pharisees blind guides, warning people not to follow their ways because when the blind lead the blind, they both fall into a ditch. So Jesus has already adjudged them to be blind men. Their question then is unnecessary, but seeing as they ask it, Jesus is willing to answer it, though his answer's probably not going to make them very happy. He says, if you were blind, you would have no sin. But now you say we see, therefore your sin remains, which, let's face it, doesn't make much sense. Does this mean that blind people are free of sin? Well, hardly, but then what does it mean? Consider first the questioners. As I said, I don't think they came asking because they wanted to know. They came confident that the answer would of course be no. Why else would it be anything else? How could the leaders of Israel, teachers of the law, learned men, how could they possibly be blind? Well, let's see, shall we? In their interrogation of our previously blind man, they stated that Jesus was not from God, that he broke the Sabbath laws as they saw them, and was therefore a sinner. All of which was obviously false. It makes them at least idiots, and at the worst blind guides. So yes, they are blind, and yet Jesus appears to be saying they're not. Let's read it again. If you were blind, you would have no sin. But now you say we see, therefore your sin remains. So they're not blind. Actually, potentially, that is what he's saying. In a metaphorical sense, they're not blind to the things of God, right? If they were merely blind, they wouldn't know they had a problem, right? Right? Or they would know they did have a problem, maybe. If they were blind, they would know they had a problem. That would make them truly ignorant. The truly ignorant are not sinning in their ignorance. That's what Jesus is saying. If you're actually blind, i.e. ignorant of the things of God, so blind in the metaphoric sense, then you wouldn't be in sin. We won't get into the wider implications of that today. Safe to say there are certain sins that ignorance is not a cover for. But in terms of understanding the finer points of Christianity, or even who Jesus is, there is some excuse given for blind ignorance. There is a certain amount of grace given to those who haven't been taught, those that are ignorant. Mind you, once someone's aware of their ignorance, they do have to do something with the knowledge that they gain. Ignorance is only bliss if it's actually ignorance. As for these Pharisees, they're not blind, they're not ignorant, because they think they see, but also they're not, right? They are learned men. And they think they see Jesus clearly enough to call him a sinner, which is why he says, therefore your sin remains. Because they keep refusing to deal with their sin, they are bound to it. The blind man knows he's blind, right? I mean, our man said it. This I do know. I was once blind. So he got that, right? He knew he had a problem, and when Jesus came to offer him a cure, he jumped at it. But the Pharisees have spent the last 2 years undermining him, arguing with him, insulting him. They haven't sought him out to learn from him, but rather to discredit him. So who really are the blind ones? There was a prediction given at the start of Jesus' ministry. It's recorded in the book of Matthew, and it echoes a prediction from the book of Isaiah. It states, the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali, the way of the sea, beyond the Jordan, Galilee of the Gentiles. The people living in darkness have seen a great light. On those living in the land of the shadow of death, a light has dawned. Jesus was and is that light. Light illuminates. It shows the truth. It reveals darkness. The Pharisees didn't want to come into that light. They didn't want to see. They wanted to hold on to some form of blindness. They treasured it even. Jesus said if you were blind, you would have no sin. The phrase you would have means to have and hold. It's a possessive statement. If they were actually blind, they wouldn't possess this particular sin, for the truth sets us free, does it not? If we follow the truth of God, regardless of where it leads, we are set free from our blindness. As for these men, because they say they can see, their sin remains, meaning it stays, it abides, it continues to dwell in their hearts. When the man born blind was asked by Jesus if he believed in the Son of God, his answer was to admit his blindness in this regard. He said, "Who is he?" He didn't know who it was, right? He was blind, ignorant to that truth, but he was willing to learn, something the Pharisees just never managed to bring themselves to do. The whole thing reminded me of the parable of the tax collector and the Pharisees Pharisee from Luke's Gospel. I'll read it to you. So this is Luke 18, 9 to 14. 2 men went up to the temple to pray. One was a Pharisee and the other was a tax collector. The Pharisee stood by himself and prayed, "God, I thank you that I am not like the other men, swindlers, evildoers, adulterers, or even like this tax collector. I fast twice a week and pay tithes of all that I acquire." But the tax collector stood at a distance, unwilling even to lift up his eyes to heaven. Instead, he beat his breast and said, "God, have mercy to me, a sinner." I tell you, this man, rather than the Pharisee, went home justified. For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, but the one who humbles himself will be exalted. What prevented these men from seeing the light was their own pride. This is why pride comes before a fall. Prideful people never see the pitfalls. They think they're above all of that. But pride gets you nowhere. In the ultimate sense, the only place pride takes you is hell and damnation. If you were blind, you would have no sin, but now you say, "We see, therefore your sin remains." They, in their arrogance, say, "We see," but they don't see, not really. They have no vision of the truth. They only see the things that Jesus does that upsets their apple carts. They didn't see the markers of the Messiah that were all over him. They didn't see the miracles that accompanied him that were all predictors of the one to come. They didn't have the excuse of ignorance, however, that the general populace of the day had. They were not blind in that sense. They boasted of their knowledge of the law and of the prophets. Jesus didn't need to condemn them. They condemned themselves. And so they are a warning to all of us to never be so sure of ourselves that we can't be wrong. To never be blinded by our own arrogance and pride, that we miss the lessons before us. God hands us lessons for our lives on a regular basis. They're designed to help us grow and change, to become more like him. Don't miss them. They're designed to help you. And don't pray like the Pharisees. Here's a better prayer for you to keep the light shining in the darkness at bay. Pray, "Open the eyes of my heart, Lord. Show me my blind spots and help me to change." This is how we stop ourselves becoming blind and turning into a Pharisee. And there, with that nasty little warning, with that, I come to the end of my lesson. That is all I have for you this week. I pray that you and your household are blessed and that all that you put your hands to prospers in Jesus' name. And I will hopefully see you again next week. Ka kite anō.